When thinking about accessibility in the classroom, I like to take a learning objective approach. You're probably familiar with learning objectives for students, and they're often framed in such a way that a student should be able to do something after they have taken your course. For example, a learning objective might be, after this course, students should be able to explain the central dogma of biology. When thinking about accessibility, I consider what students should be able to do when they enter my classroom based on how I structure my materials and my course. As a framework, when thinking about accessibility in the classroom, I hold myself to these following objectives. Students should be able to engage with my materials. And what I mean by this is that students should be able to use my materials, whether they have a disability that impacts their ability to see or hear or to process the things that they see or they hear, or a variety of other disabilities. And so I aim to provide my materials in multiple ways and make sure that the access to those materials in multiple ways is easy for my students to understand. For example, I use image descriptions when I provide images. I use captions on videos. I even provide transcripts for videos as well. I also believe that students should be able to engage with my materials without contacting me. And so individuals with disabilities should not need to reach out to me to get clarity on the assignment, on the format of the assignment, on the due date, on ways to access things on the learning management system or on the website. And so I aim to provide as much clarity in the instructions as I can, and also to provide videos showing me navigating through the LMS and the website, and transcripts and captions on those videos as well, so that students can easily find where the materials are. And I structure the LMS site in as intuitive as a way as I possibly can, and provide multiple ways to access the different kinds of materials. I believe that students should be able to engage with my materials on their own schedule. Students with disabilities and chronic illnesses might be balancing doctor's appointments and flares of their illnesses and fluctuating levels of motivation and engagement and executive functioning. And so I aim to provide my students with my materials as far in advance of the course as I can. And I also try to provide as much of the material ahead of time as I can. So I try not to only provide the materials for the upcoming week at the beginning of the week, but I try to provide as much of the semester early on in the semester as I can. And this is really important because students might have downtime when they're awaiting at a doctor visit, and they might be able to use that to get ahead on assignments. Alternatively, they may be unexpectedly stuck in an appointment for longer than they were expecting and suddenly not have that time to go over the materials anymore. And so it would be great if they can get access to those materials ahead of time to plan. And then finally, I believe that students should be able to engage with my materials without needing to jump through hoops. I think often when instructors think about accommodations and accessibility, they think about them as being the same thing, but not all students are able to get accommodations, because accommodations through the Office of Disability Services require paperwork and actual diagnoses, and these are things that only the most privileged students in our classrooms will have. Lots of students are struggling knowing that there is something going on, but not having the time or the money to get a diagnosis. For some the diagnoses, the testing and the paperwork expires, and so students need to go back to the doctor again to have that paperwork filed again. And so being able to provide a structured course that promotes flexibility and revision and allows students to revisit the material helps those students who cannot get accommodations for whatever needs. Further, all of these objectives help students who are not dealing with disabilities but have other responsibilities or other challenges. For example, students may just prefer to read transcripts as opposed to watching videos. Or students might not live in an environment where they can easily listen to videos, but they live in an environment where they can more easily read. So students may also be working jobs or have caregiving responsibilities, and so they might need to engage with the materials on their own time, like late at night or early in the morning or on weekends, and so they don't have the ability to get into contact with you ahead of time, and they may need to be planning around their family or personal lives. And students may have these challenges, but they cannot get accommodations for those things through the Office of Disability Services. And so by requiring students to come to us and ask for extensions or asking for flexibility on their own each time, it requires our students to be vulnerable with us and to share parts of their lives that they might not be willing to share. And so by just structuring our class with all of these objectives in mind, prioritizing flexibility and allowing students to do as much work asynchronously as possible, we can promote the success of all of our students regardless of what their disability, responsibilities, life circumstances are, and without requiring them to disclose any of that to us. Be sure to check out my website, katekirby.com, and follow me on Twitter and Instagram at KateSKirby.